Thank you, and welcome to the Agency Balance Podcast, where we talk about marketing, tech, real-life self-improvements, and things that make you happy to find your balance. Agency Balance is sponsored by Smartiger, a marketing technology agency that creates solutions that align B2B marketing, sales, and service to drive results throughout the entire customer journey. Get the MarTech experts. Get Smartiger.com. Here is your host of the Agency Balance Podcast, David Snyder.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Agency Balance. I'm thrilled today to bring you another guest, Josh Liegel, President of EIC Solutions. Josh, welcome to the podcast.
Good to be here, Dave. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much. I'm thrilled that you're here for a couple reasons. One, we're doing this live in my studio.
Yes.
Which is great. We were talking about the differences of doing this virtually versus in person. There's so much different type of energy you can get being in the same room.
Absolutely.
And we're going to dig into that in and of itself in this episode. But the other reason why I'm pumped for this is because Josh and EIC Solutions was my company's very first client ever. Client one, I think it goes back to 2008, which is forever ago. And you're my first client on the podcast.
There you go.
So I think it was just fitting to have that. Josh, I would love for you to just spend a few minutes to talk about your background, your role, where you came about, and a little bit about EIC Solutions.
Okay. So I'll talk first about myself, just to kind of lay that out first. Very open as far as who I am and kind of where I've come from. So I'm a son of two, a brother of 9, a husband of 1, a father of 3. I've got a lot of different titles that I might have given through my family. So I was raised by 2 educators, both teachers, and I have 9 siblings, 7 of who are adopted. And most of the kids who were adopted also had some sort of special needs, and that'll kind of dovetail into kind of other things we'll talk about later. But growing up with that, you sort of just learn how to be a part of a bigger thing. When your family is 12 people, your immediate family is 12 people. Everything is an ordeal. Everything is a big production. So I grew up in this family, just sort of learning how to be a part of something larger than myself. And now, grown, I have my wife. We have 3 kids. We had twins, and then 16 months later, 1 more. So they're basically all the same age. They're all in high school now, so brings its own challenges. 3 high schoolers at once. So just that's kind of my personal side of my life. And from a professional side, I am the president and CEO of EIC Solutions. I started with the company as a sales guy, just a regular old sales guy 18 years ago. And just through, time and opportunity, just sort of hanging on and seeing what's next, was able to sort of start to move up the chain through management and then wind up, in the top slot. And that started at the end of 2019 into 2020 is really when that really transpired. And so for the past almost 3 years, I've been running the company and trying to find the ways to grow and find the ways to build the team and build the company that I have always wanted to work for. EIC Solutions is an industrial manufacturing company. We manufacture what is called a thermoelectric air conditioner. Go ahead and Google that, because I'm sure no one knows what it is. It is a air conditioner that works with no compressors, no refrigerant, no oil. The only moving parts are the fans. So it's a solid state cooling device, and we primarily apply it to electronics protection for sensitive equipment in the industrial and military fields.
Wow. That's amazing. Not only the technology that goes into, because I love thermoelectric cooling, everybody. It's really cool, actually. See what I did there?
I do. I see it.
But so interesting. Thanks so much for being vulnerable and sharing kind of your background on how you kind of got started with family life and now where you are from a company perspective. I maybe there's some parallels there. Sure. About. I think one of being many in a family, you're always trying to get attention, and you're always trying to stand out, or managing younger or maybe older siblings too.
Sure.
Any parallels there with being in a large family and then managing people?
Sure. I to speak to getting attention. I'm second born, fifth oldest, so I'm pretty much right in the middle, no matter how you slice it. And I was probably the attention-seeking child on some level. So yeah, I get that side of it. But also, when you have, to speak to managing, like, we're kind of clustered, my family. There's like a group of older kids, and then there's like a group of younger kids. The age span is about 15 years between youngest to oldest. And like, I have a sister who's a month older than me, and I have a sister who's 16 months older than me, and then I have a sister who's 13 years younger than me. So when you're kind of clustered in at the top, you do wind up bearing a lot of responsibility and kind of learning how to, manage. If my parents had to be out one night, it might be my job to make dinner for 10 people, So at 12 years old, learning how to make, dinner for 10 people is, kind of a big undertaking, but you kind of learn how to, all right, I know that if I ask this person this too early, they're going to get mad because it's not ready yet. And, so you just kind of learn personalities, you learn what's necessary, what needs to get done, and you just sort of figure it out on the fly regularly. And even managing up to, older siblings, some older siblings who were just, out of the house doing this, that, and the other thing, lessons or, jobs or whatever. And then I have older siblings who were handicapped, so they couldn't, do much, so you'd have to like help them with certain things. I mean, lift my sister was in a wheelchair, so we'd have to lift her in and out of the car, lift her in and out of bed, those kinds of things. And so you learn that pretty young, how to be a big help and a contributor to that, and that there's a lot of small items that have to happen in order to run a ship that big, a family that big, and you have to be willing to jump in and do any one of those things. It's easy to be like, well, I want to, choose the movie tonight, or I want to, take everybody to the park, or, something like that. But you also have to be like, well, I'm going to, put my sister in bed. I'm going to, help these kids with their homework. I'm going to, do these things. And not because, my parents weren't around, but just because when you have a big family, everyone contributes, so you try to just make sure you're always a part of what's going on.
Yeah. So I would imagine that in business, you have different levels there as well. So you might have others, even at the president level, there's
sure.
somebody above you that you have to go and talk to. And then there's different layers of management and all the way down to entry level people. So, talk about your vision, because you said something there about, you wanted to run the company the way that you wanted to work when you were in there, right? Mm-hmm. So you were as an employee for a period of time. You were obviously probably making some mental notes along the way.
Sure.
And I could draw some parallel to this too, because I was in the same boat. So talk to me about some of the things that you wanted to do and how you wanted to make an impact in leading this next generation of EIC.
Sure. So, I've being at the company for 18 years, in today's day and age, is not something that you hear of a lot, where someone stays at one company and that company is able to provide multiple levels of opportunity. Oftentimes, you have to leave in order to find those new opportunities. You hit that ceiling at one company, and so you go somewhere else. So having been at one company for a long time, I've kind of gotten to experience a lot of different things. And, in one company, I have felt like I was in a dead-end job. I have watched the company have a meteoric rise. I've watched the company equally have, the downside of that come down the other side of the slope. I've seen, slow and consistent growth. I've seen really fast growth. I've seen awesome management. I've seen poor management, and I've seen it all in the same company. So it gives me a certain perspective of like, I've watched people do it well. I've watched people do it poorly, oftentimes the same people, because nobody's going to do everything perfect, So looking at all of that, I wanted to, when I was given the opportunity to run the company, I wanted to reestablish certain things in order to make sure that people understood what I was trying to accomplish and how that I wanted their success just as much as I wanted my own. And so I wanted to build the company sort of rebuild the company in a way that sort of started to step us not only up from a, sales and revenue and development and all of those perspectives that every company is trying to grow in, but also from an internal cultural perspective, trying to create the company that values their employees, that realizes that, from the top to the bottom, all of us have specific roles that we need to fill and jobs that need to be done. And just because it's the job that the lowest guy on the totem pole does, doesn't mean that it's inconsequential or not important. When that job doesn't get done, you find out real fast, So I try to create a culture that allows everyone to feel value.
Yeah, and I'd imagine that can be challenging sometimes, especially being in industrial manufacturing and you're focused on quality and consistency of making a product the same way every time. Talk about some of the things that come to mind that keep your team engaged with not getting maybe burned out or bored or doing the same thing over and over again. Talk about that, or anything that comes to, innovation.
So, that's a lot of different things, right? So how do you take somebody who basically their job is to do this type of task day in and day out, and to do it well and not to lose steam and do it poorly or to, start to cut corners or any of those things. And, part of that goes to direct engagement with them personally. People are much more willing to do what's necessary when they feel like what they're doing is valued. So, and that goes down to simply walking out onto the shop floor and saying good morning to people, touching base with them, seeing how they're doing, asking them questions. What are you working on? People will tend to take pride in their work when you notice their work. If they feel like you don't see what they do, you don't care what they do, they're just a cog in a machine, it's very easy to kind of let that slide. But when you go out and you look at it and you ask them what's going on and you ask them what the challenges are and you engage them, they're very willing to talk. They're very willing to get engaged. And when you applaud their successes, they get very charged up about what they're doing, even if it's the same thing day after day after day, And there's a lot to be said about that, the type of person who can sit there and do that job day after day and still be engaged with it. We tend to sort of push those types of people sort of like, they're sort of at the bottom, and these high performers, switch from one thing to the next real fast. They're the high performers, and these lower people are sort of looked down upon. But honestly, those are the people who are going to be consistent, and they're going to be, your bedrock later when you really need them. I had a guy go into partial retirement this year, and he is the foundation of where we start the product line. It literally is step one, and he's building these things step one. And when he went into partial retirement, we were like, oh man, like, what are we gonna do? This guy is like the bedrock of everything we're doing. He's the foundation. Like, we've got to get good people down there. So you can't just assume because the job seems easy or doesn't take a lot of thought that it is not something that is extremely important to do well and repeatedly, So I just really wanted to make sure that these people felt like they were valued, that they had a connection to me. Growing up through the company kind of helps, because I've literally worked alongside of them. I've worked in managing them, and now I'm working to lead them, so they've known me the whole time, which gives me like a ton of, points in my side that somebody who's just walking in the door to lead somewhere wouldn't really have. So that's sort of an unfair advantage that I have, I guess. But at the same time, they know me. They know they can approach me. They know they can talk to me. They know, and sometimes on a personal level, sometimes not just about work, that just they're really going through it at home. They've really got an issue they need to deal with. And, I want to make sure that I hear them, because the second you don't hear that, that's going to dramatically affect their ability to work and their willingness to work. So I always want to be able to be available to them and, make sure that they realize their own value.
Absolutely. Those are some great points that Josh is making, and hopefully that's resonating with the listeners out there. And I can draw that absolute parallel. working I'm on the agency side, so started off as a graphic designer developer, worked into project management, doing estimates and managing project and scope, then to being an account executive, managing relationships, then going on to the sales side, moving up into a VP position, and then inevitably where I've landed is CEO. So I'm kind of in the same boat where it's like you do have an advantage in that. Number one, I always say this, it's like people can't pull a fast one on you sometimes because It's like, I did that. Like, don't try to pull that on me. Like, I did that before. But the most important thing is you can then at any point, and you said this, and if you're not doing this as a manager or leader, start doing this, is get off your high horse and sit down with them one-on-one. If they're on the level of they're working on the execution, roll up your sleeves and get your hands dirty and try to understand what their problems are, because the problems and challenges that they're facing are totally different. For you. Their objective might be to produce X number of things in a given day, or problem solve why this unit isn't syncing the way it's supposed to be syncing. I don't know how to build thermoelectric. Electric scares me. I had to rewire an outlet over the weekend, and I said to my wife, I was like, this is the one thing that scares me. I'd rather do plumbing.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a little bit scary. But I think, as leaders, it's easy to think, well, they've kind of got it handled, and I don't really know what it is they do. So I'll just leave it alone because it's not my problem. And I think from an employee perspective, it's very easy to view the leader as this guy either knows it all or thinks he knows it all.
Yeah.
And as a leader, the biggest trap we can fall into is I, as the leader, know it all or think I know it all, And so when you're looking at your team, when I look at my team and I think of, all right, what am I going to do next? Who am I going to add next? The first step is I need to add people who know things that I don't know, right? Like they need to handle the things that I don't know how to do. And then the second step is, well, now I need to have people who can handle the things that I don't have time to do because I can't do it all, right? So when I create that team, at no point am I looking at those people as devalued, because either it's something that I can't do because I don't know how, or it's something that I can't do because I don't have time. So they fill very, very important roles in my success and the company's success. So I can't look at them as, you don't have this degree or this skill set or these letters after your name, so therefore you're sort of, expendable in some way,
Yeah. I want to talk about two things. The first thing that comes to mind is incentives, and talk about some of the things that you do, either, and it doesn't have to be like financially, or maybe it is, but talk about some of the things that you're working on to help motivate your employees, to get them excited about the new vision and where you're going. Can you share any of that?
Sure. So I think, money is a great motivator and a horrible motivator all at once. Money is like, everybody wants more money, right? I don't think there's a single person that would be listening to this podcast or, involved in this who would say, no, I don't want any more money. I'm fine. Like everyone would say, sure, I want more. But it's a slippery slope, because you're basically paying someone to do a job. You're saying, okay, I want you here and you're capable of doing this. And that's why you're earning this money, right? You are earning that. I'm not giving it to you. And if you just start to tack a lot of stuff on top of that, it starts to become expected, and it starts to become very hard to, still incentivize the same way over time. So I think the better way to really incentivize them as a company is, number one, treat them with respect. Treat them the way they want to be treated, Treat them as part of the team, as a valued member. Not just here because this is where you work, not here because your time card sits over by the time clock and you punch it, right? But here because you have a valuable contribution that you're going to bring. Then you need to hear that contribution regularly. You need to understand what it is they're doing, why they're doing it, and they are the experts in the field. They're the ones you're trusting to build the product that you're sending out as a representation of your company. So they are the ones who can say, this isn't working because of this, or this would work better if we did this. And you regularly hear that value, and you regularly applaud that value, and because of that, people feel that value, and the money becomes a great thing, but it's not the thing that drives anything. It's just sort of like, yeah, I earned this. I did well and I earned this. And the other side is I feel heard. I feel valued. I feel like these people understand who I am. I'm big, I say to my people a lot, like, life happens outside of work, right? So I can't just be like, well, you're here at 8:30, you're here till 5. Do whatever I need you to do here, and if you're out for some reason or you have this or that, like, that's a negative check mark against you. Like, that's not fair to anybody, right? Like, people have doctor's appointments they go to, people have kids and their kids get sick and have to stay home from school, and you got to be able to look at them and say, they're worth more to me to take this day off and handle this personal situation and come back and be like, okay, that's taken care of, than them feeling like, well, if I don't get to work, I'm going to be in trouble, and now I'm going to go to work and I'm distracted the whole time, and life is happening. I got to be gracious enough to let that happen outside of work. And when you do that, suddenly people start to be like, well, I'm here when I'm here, right? Because I know that if I needed to step out, it would be okay. And it's not looked at as like, well, why were you 20 minutes late one time? If it's a historical problem, then we can address that. But it's like, sometimes we get so nitpicky, right, about little things. And it's like, we got to be willing to let these people be people. They're not cogs in a machine. As soon as you treat them like that, they're willing to give you so much more.
Yeah, and I bet you that's really easy to fall into that trap in manufacturing, because you're making something. You're literally making cogs,
right?
So it's easy to get trapped into that. Two really great points there. Treat people with respect. Create the value in that relationship, and remember that they're hired there for a reason. They are the experts. They are experts in what they're doing. I live by that. I trust all my people, and they're there for that for a reason. Why micromanage them, right? The other thing I wanted to talk about is managing time and to-dos, because you quickly touched on it, that they're in a position where they're doing different things to help you.
Right.
There's so many different things that you're responsible for, not only managing people and vendor relationships and dealing with awesome agencies like SmartAcre.
Yes.
But so I'm all about balance and trying to figure out balance, and you and I have had many discussions. I can imagine that there's a lot in any given day, and sometimes it's unpredictable. What are some of the things that you can share that you found to really help you stay organized and managing to-dos and different things coming at you? Sure.
So number one, I have to be able to delegate tasks that are not mine to handle to make sure they're being handled. And I have to trust, it goes back to what we were just talking about. I have to be able to trust my team. I have to be able to know that if I told this person to do this, they're going to get it done. Maybe I just need to follow up on what the result was. But empowering people to do their jobs so that they don't feel like, I'm just waiting for them to screw up or waiting for them to, report back. I'm checking in because I need to know the answer. I'm not checking in to make sure that they've, checked the task off. And, I think from a management on my side, I use task management software. I have a very specific way that I organize my emails. I have several folders. I have response folders, waiting for info folders, first thing folders. So that way, as things come into my inbox, I can put them where I need them. I can file it if it needs to be filed. I can delete it if it's trash. And then I can put them in these files so they're not just staring at me in my inbox all day long. If you guys know who Tim Challies is, he's an author, and he wrote a book called Do More Better. And in the appendix of the book, he talks about email organization, and it's an excellent analogy. But he says the way we handle our inboxes is akin to us going to the mailbox every day, opening it, pulling out all the mail, taking one piece out, stuffing everything back in, and closing it again. And then the next day going in and pulling all that same mail out, pulling the one thing you need and stuffing everything back in. If you don't put things where they belong, if you don't throw away the things that are garbage, that's just going to get stuffed full of things, and you're not going to be able to find the things you actually need or want. So I have to keep a very strict organization of my emails. I probably get, 200 plus emails a day. So I have to be able to organize those or it will drown me very quickly. So there's that. And then task management software that just kind of says, these are the projects we're working on. Here are the dates they need to be done. And then I can just reschedule all those dates when I miss them.
That's right. It's funny you mentioned about email. The other day, because I work from home, my youngest walks in and goes, Dad, you have 47,000 unread emails. How? And I said, well, so what I do is I don't open most of them. I can tell that it's not important. I just leave it there. He's like, you don't even delete it? I go, no, I don't delete anything. Because that's even a step.
Sure.
So I think the point, Josh, you gave some great tips there. And those little microseconds add up in your day. It's a distraction. As leaders, we make so many decisions throughout the day. And if you can minimize some of the subconscious decisions that you're making, again, for me, I have 5 black t-shirts lined up in my closet. Guess what I wore today? A black t-shirt.
Sure.
I didn't have to make that decision because I was setting up for this, and I would much rather give that energy towards you. So those are some great, tips. Talk a little bit about, because you're managing other things. I could imagine not only, and touch on it maybe, how it's different from, during the pandemic and then after where we are today. I can imagine supply chain issues, managing vendors could be difficult, and even maybe just the people aspect that I correct me if I'm wrong, I think you had to do like partial remote during. How do you manage something like that when you're producing a product?
Sure. So that was literally the official switch to me as leader of the company was on March 1st of 2020. And, 11 days later is when, the pandemic struck and everything went into turmoil. So my first order of business as leader of the company is figure out how not to die. So it's okay, so here we go. So in a manufacturing environment, there was no way for me to be all right, you guys all work from home. We'll see you in a little while, just bring the products back when you're done. We have to have people in the building. Now we have enough physical space that we were able to take all our manufacturing staff and spread them out and kind of move things around for the first couple weeks while things were really sort of unknown and, we didn't know what was going to happen next. And, they were saying we're going to close for 2 weeks or we're going to do this or, we just have to do this for now. When everything was still very new, we had everyone working alternating shifts on every other day. And so we were working out ways to still continue to manufacture the product without losing, any of my staff due to fear of, I'm in a situation where I can't work here because I'm right next to this person and my wife's at home and she's sick. And so I don't want to get, her any more sick. She's compromised, or whatever. So there was a lot of that where you're just trying to figure out, okay, well, how are we going to get to tomorrow, right? Everything became very, very immediate, very, very quickly. So we just constantly had to look at, okay, well, what's going to happen next? What are we going to do tomorrow? What are we going to do the next day? Where are we going to wind up? So we ran that for a couple weeks and then everything started to cool a little bit from okay, we kind of know what needs to happen now. We know people should have masks. We know we should have sanitizing stations. We know, but then of course you couldn't get any of those things. So there was that challenge, but we were constantly having to reevaluate. We sent all of our office employees, so engineers, salespeople, admin people, everybody went home and worked from home, which we did not have a way to do that. So like many companies, we were scrambling to figure out, okay, how are we going to remote into our desktops? How are we going to share information? We went from a standard phone line system to, VoIPs just so we could have, ways to talk to people and, continue to service our customer base. So there was a lot of big challenges in that. We got through 2020. It was a great year, but then when we got to the end of 2020, we started to see the problem with having half of the staff working remotely and basically my office staff working remotely and my manufacturing staff working in-house, because it was really starting to drag the culture down. Because even though this wasn't happening, the way it was viewed was kind of like, well, where are those guys? We're here every day. Where are those guys? And I know those guys were working. I'm not in any way, accusing them otherwise. But there was this split between people where it just said, we have to figure out how we can have everyone understanding that we're all, pulling together. Even though you might not see this person physically on a regular basis, they're still part of this team. They're still contributing. They're still valued. From the other side, from the people who were gone, one of the things you find in manufacturing is there's a lot of schedule shift. There's a lot of, manpower changes, supply chain changes. And the people who were outside the office weren't seeing that. They were just sort of like business as usual. I'm making these sales. They're going to go out in X amount of weeks, right? And so then they're calling up and they're like, what's going on? Like, the customer's saying they're like, we're 3 weeks late on this order. And we're like, yeah. And they're like, well, what happened? And we're like, everybody's firing on all cylinders, but we can't get this part and we can't get that part. And when they're not seeing it firsthand and everything's secondary information, it's very hard for them to sort of wrap their brain around, oh, okay, yeah, I see these challenges. Because that's how we've always operated. When you can walk out into the manufacturing floor and say, hey, what's going on today? And then suddenly you're not doing that, your assumption is everything's great, but then over time you start to see, okay, they're sort of disconnected from the whole thing and we need to reconnect them so this whole operation is moving in one direction and we're not starting to splinter into multiple directions.
Yeah. I'm immediately thinking of a scene from The Office. It's literally like the salespeople, the admin people on the first floor, and then downstairs is the warehouse, and they're yelling at Daryl. Daryl, where's the 100-pound white? Has that gone out to Acme Company today?
Yeah,
it's exactly what I'm picturing right now. But so fast forward, like post and where you're at today, like I think in ways, correct me if I'm wrong, like the pandemic has forced companies like yours to accelerate digital transformation systems, the upgrading technology at lightning's pace.
Yeah.
I mean, are you still finding that there's bits of technology or gaps that you're forcing or that you're being forced that you need to implement because of where we are in our country today?
Sure. So, I mean, there's the challenge of making sure you're technologically advanced enough to handle the situations that are like culturally driven right now with, people needing to work remotely or people, having certain situations that would cause them to need to be remote for a period of time or, whether it's just because that's the new allowance as sort of an expectation that people have of jobs, all those things. But then you also have all these other contributing factors. If you deal with the government, you deal with military work, CMMC compliance is coming up in 2023 and that has to be done. Then there's tons of stuff that has to go with that. And so there's all these different layers there's like daily operations in the midst of a post-COVID world. And then there's all the new compliance documentation and everything that has to go along with doing work in that sphere. So you have all these moving parts all at once that you're trying to make sure that none of them are grinding each other, right? So there's a lot of that management that goes on a daily basis right now as we sort of cross some of these, or I'd say jump some of these hurdles because they're pretty significant. But once we get through them, we'll have a really nice structure. So it's really just trying to be flexible day to day and sort of understand that we're not there yet, but we have to consistently move towards it. We can't ever lose focus on what we're trying to accomplish. So we can't ever just sort of put the ship on autopilot and take a deep breath. We don't have time for that right now.
So I imagine managing a lot of outside third parties. You talked about managing logistics and parts, and that could affect building something that you're trying to produce. And that's managing people in and of itself, managing vendor relationships. Talk about how do you even go about doing that and be organized? Do you have other people that help you with that?
Yeah, so I mean, my ops manager, Mike Clark, he's the one who's sort of steering that ship as far as management and of material and vendors and all that. But I think What's really been exposed in all this, post-pandemic stuff where we're really seeing supply chain just weakening is, we're all sort of subject to like the Amazon effect, right? Like we're just very used to cheap and fast. We can get anything we want. We can get it for dirt cheap and we can get it in 2 days. You know what I mean? Like, and the shipping's free. That's what we're used to. And the reality is, because the supply chain has thinned down so much, that idea of like, I'm going to be able to find what I need is not necessarily true. You're going to probably struggle to find what you need depending on what you're looking for. So what you have to do instead is you have to start to treat your vendors like employees. You have to start to develop them. This is what I need from you. This is what I expect from you. And you start to grow a relationship over time, and you can go back to that and draw on it. It's like I was saying earlier, when you have a team and you have put into them, right? Good friend of mine always says, you can't make withdrawals unless you've made deposits, so it's like I can't ask something of my team if I have not put into them what they need. And it's the same thing for a vendor relationship. They need to know what it is I'm after, how I need it, and I need to treat them with the respect they deserve and not just expect, well, I'm the customer, I know best, so if you have a part, I need it tomorrow and it's got to be free, and it's got there's an aspect of like treating them as if they're one of your employees. If you spend a lot of time developing an employee and suddenly they make a mistake, you're not going to be likely to just be like, okay, you're fired. We're not talking about, some sort of egregious mistake, but they make a mistake that's sizable. You're not going to just turn around and axe them, but you are going to correct the mistake, and then you're going to move forward. You should treat your vendors the same way. If there's a mistake, we should turn around and look at it and say, okay, what happened? Let's fix that, and let's move on so we can continue this relationship. I've invested time in developing this vendor. I need to be able to draw on that investment now. That's how we've sort of approached, how do we get through some of these cycles, is really direct communication with those vendors regularly, really trying to understand what their challenges are, so we know where those, all of those log jams are going to come through on our end. So we keep constant communication with our vendors in order to make sure they know what's coming. We try to prioritize what we need, and that way they know how to best work for us.
How does that, managing those outside relationships, how does that affect the culture internally?
So again, it dovetails into the same thing of how we want to work internally. We want to be treated with respect. We want to be respectful of each other. We want to move the whole thing forward, because when the company's successful, everyone's successful. So we want to continue to sort of push that whole mantra over and over again. And you do the same with your vendors. You want to say to the vendors, like, look, when you hit all your delivery dates on, these parts, I can sell faster, and therefore I'm going to win better contracts and order more parts, so it's more success for you. Your success now adds up to success later, so we just continually have to drive that home with a lot of them. And it's very similar to what we want our employees to feel too. And
how do you, I would imagine that you said you get a lot of emails. I would imagine when there's an opportunity to select a new vendor, or something. I talked about innovation. How do you innovate, or how do you improve? Talk me through some of the things that as a business owner you look out for, and maybe it's the people side of it too when you're deciding to partner with somebody new.
Right. So, the biggest thing we're going to look for is like, do we have a need? First and foremost. Again, if you treat your vendors, your onboarding process, your selection process the same way you would treat an employee, the first thing you're going to say is, do we need another person in this slot, right? Are we lacking here? So, maybe you've brought on a new, line or a new offering, and you need someone who can produce that, or you need someone to manage it. So you're looking for an employee to bring that on. If someone were to just come to you tomorrow and say, hey, I'm this great employee, why don't you hire me? If you had no need, you wouldn't hire them, because the only way you would be hiring them is if you were letting someone else go. So we don't want to do that to our vendors unless there's a problem, unless there's actually an issue where we say, ooh, yeah, we really need to solve this. So we want to be careful that just because someone presents themselves as this amazing manufacturer of this or supplier of that, we don't just jump ship with our existing people, because it takes a lot more time to onboard this new vendor, train them up to what we do, making sure the expectations are set clearly, and sort of, get really clear performance out of them. It's going to be months, maybe even longer, before we really start to feel for like, yeah, they're a good fit. So we don't want to just jump ship with these people we spent years sort of grooming and setting expectations with, just because this guy looks better or has a better offering.
I get those, and we all get those emails constantly. I always kind of say sometimes it's just timing. If sometimes if I see an email, majority of the time it's like unsubscribe, block. Stop selling me this. I don't need this. I'm not ready. But it is a timing thing. You don't know when that timing might be.
Sure.
So if they catch you at the right time, it might be that. So we're a vendor.
Yes,
or we're a partner.
Yes.
We're a partner. We don't like to use the term vendor internally, because we do think that there's a partnership in that, because it wouldn't be a partnership if we didn't have the tenure that we have. We both feeling each other's pains and wins.
Right.
So I think and you can share anything you want to share right now about this.
All right, let's get into it.
But being a client of mine, obviously some things that I'm not afraid to talk about is, we've had turnover over the years. You've seen a lot of different people come in and out of your account. But I think, it's important that, one of the things that I always did with you is I always, maintained a relationship, number one. I was always transparent with you. That's the other thing in partnership. I think it's really important that you communicate and don't just, shush it under the rug if there's turnover. The agency world, there's a lot of that. Right. There's a lot of that. You get to work with a lot of different smart, specific people on different things that help you, because you don't have an in-house marketing department. You outsource that. Outsource that to it. So this is almost like we are an extension of your team. But the immediate thing I would like to get your thoughts on is, so you're doing all those different things, and then how is it like you're interfacing with us on a weekly, bi-weekly basis, and getting on Zoom calls and then talking about the things that you need to do to help grow your business?
Sure. So again, it really just follows the same framework. I have, if I have an employee and that employee has gained trust and has demonstrated ability and I'm going to hand them more things that I'm not going to have to worry about. I might come back, hand you a project and then come back in a week and say, hey, where are we at with this project? But I'm not with you like every 4 hours, like, please provide updates. Please tell me what, it's like I've given it to this employee and they've said, yeah, I'm going to handle it. And I trust them to do that. And, you and I have worked together for so long. I know that when I say, to your team, hey, look, we need to get this done, they're on it. And, they bring me stuff all the time. This is what we're thinking. Can you weigh in on this? And, the reason, again, going back to what I said earlier, you hire new people, you add to your team when first you don't know something and you need that skill set added. And second, if you don't have time to manage that. So I have both of those things with you guys. I am not a marketer. That's not my skill set. I'm not trained in it. It's not, where my brain lies. It's something that is necessary, that needs to happen, but I'm not the guy to do it. So SmartAcre brings to the table like, hey, we are experts in this. And so it's like having a, top of the line marketing employee who can handle all that and make it happen for me. But the thing that's always been amazing to me is the level of understanding they're willing to gain of our product offerings, of our culture, of how we operate, in order to know, like, okay, I know that if they know for me, if they come to me and they say, hey, we need this, they got to give me a date. If they don't give me a date, it's going to slip. I'm not going to stay in front of it because it's going to be sort of nebulous and in the background, or if they say, hey, we're working on this project for this thing, they have an understanding of what it is they're actually talking about, and it's not just words on a page to them, and the level of investment it takes to get to that point is significant. And that's really one of the things that I have found to be invaluable over the years, is just to really say, like, when I tell you guys something, you understand what I'm talking about, and it's not because you're experts in what we do, it's because you've taken the time to understand it enough so you can do your job effectively.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. I'm going to cut that out and use that as a testimonial. But the two things that I can share is one, we have this term, this phrase that we use, and it's ingrained. It's a culture of caring, and it goes for internally, but also for our clients, because I just think there's so much into it, and that's what I love working in an agency is. I don't get up to work for SmartAcre. I do, but I get up to work for our clients, and you get to learn all of those things. And I just think that's what's fun about being in business to business is you get to learn about all of your business challenges. But the other thing there is that A word, accountability. I think there's so much, I guess you would say like influx on where is there accountability. It's usually always falls on, well, the accountability is on the vendor side, but in order for it to be a successful partnership, there needs to be accountability on both sides. So,
right.
That's really important about putting dates and holding, accountability there. I can imagine with managing people and managing vendor relationships and you don't have to manage an awesome agency, but, and culture and growing and making sure products get out and all that. Balance, right? Like, how are you balancing your day? Is that something that you're still working on? Talk to me about balance.
Sure. So, balance is one of those things that's thrown around a lot now. You see a lot about, creating good work-life balance and creating, good, barriers in place to make sure your work-life balance isn't out of whack and everything. And, the more I thought about that, I don't want it to just be buzzwords, right? You go back to like culture and, accountability and like, these are all real things, but they're also buzzwords that people use to sound like they're talking about something. So, with balance, I look at balance and I'm like, okay, well, what does balance actually mean? So I looked it up, and the Cambridge Dictionary defines balance as the condition of someone or something in which its weight is equally divided so that it can stay in one position or be under control while moving. So when you understand what balance is, it's not equality, okay? Because things can be different weights and still be in balance depending on where you balance them, right? So if you have two weights and you have, a balance on them, and you put that, the center of it closer to one side, it will either be out of skew if they're the same weight, or it will be level if they're different weights. So it's a matter of understanding what it takes to balance what's on your plate, okay? I can't control what kind of fires I'm going to have to put out in one day. I don't know, what failure is going to happen in the field that a customer suddenly needs help with, or, what sale that's suddenly going to need support on the pitch, or what, engineering problem needs immediate addressing. I don't necessarily know what those are going to look like in any given day. So my day might look like an 8-hour cakewalk. It might look like a 12-hour slog. It just depends on day to day. So I don't think it's something where I can plan to be like, oh, I'll be balanced today. It's taking those moments that you have and being extremely deliberate with them, okay? I think when a lot of people think about balance, they think about time. And they think, well, if I go to work 8 hours a day, then I need 8 hours a day of me time or free time or whatever. So the only way to create balance is to reduce my amount of work. Sure, that sounds awesome, but it's not realistic for most people, So I did the math, and it's like there's 168 something like hours in a week. Mm-hmm. And if you work a 50-hour work week and you sleep 8 hours a night, right? Which, like, who sleeps 8 hours a night? You still have like 62 hours in a week of time to spend on other things. Now, granted, especially as a parent and, involved in different things, like, you're going to be giving the time to different things. But, like, let's be real, right? How many of us are guilty of spending an hour on our phone doom scrolling social media, or binge watching, 10 episodes of a show, that we've already watched? You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of time that is wasted, because we're not deliberate with it. We don't say, I need to unplug. I need to engage with my family. I need to engage with my friends, or I need to engage in a hobby or something like that. You know, we sort of assume that because we have this free time, that will be filled with pleasure and fun, and therefore we will automatically create balance. And the fact of the matter is that time will just evaporate if you don't do something with it and you don't choose, this is how I'm going to spend my time. Because if you are just letting it lie, it's going to tend to chaos. It's not going to tend to order. So we have to be able to sit down and say, okay, I want to do this. I want to, you take up a new hobby, you want to learn an instrument, you want to, learn a new language or something. You have to be deliberate about that. It's not just going to happen. You're not just going to show up one day and be like, wow, I can play the guitar. You have to take lessons. You have to take time to practice. It's the same thing with any relationship or anything else. You have to be deliberate about putting time and effort into those things. That's how you're going to create balance, is saying, I might only have 2 hours. When my kids were little, they were all little at the same time. I mean, they were really little. It was wild. 3 kids in diapers. We had, so everyone can understand, it's 3 kids under a year and a half. That's where we were at one point in our lives. I was working 2 jobs, and my wife was staying home with the kids, and so we're trying to figure out this balance. So I might only have, I get home from work at 5:30, 6 o'clock. They're going to bed. They're little. They're going to bed at like 7:30. Like, I might have 2 hours with them in that day. So what do? I can't get them for 8 hours, right? I only have this much time. So you be deliberate with that time. It's not going to balance itself. It takes work. Creating that, moving that piece in order to keep that balance in order is what's necessary. And you can't. It's not just going to show up one day and be like, oh, my life's in balance. Suddenly I only have to work 20 hours a week and I've got all this extra time to do all these fun things. It's like, that's probably not going to be happening, especially as a leader in an organization. You're probably going to have a lot on your plate and a lot of demands on your time. So you're going to have to choose what things get attended to and what things get pushed to later. Same in your personal life. I've got to choose time with my family, time in my church, time playing music, time, doing things, that are relaxing, time doing the work that needs to get done around my house, I have to choose and make sacrifices and do these things. But if I'm deliberate about them, then it's okay. Then it's going to create that balance. If I just sort of let it all fly and just hope that for the best, it's going to be all out of whack.
Great stuff, Josh. I agree with that 110%. If you listen to my past episodes, you'll know I've said things about prioritization is your superpower. You prioritize the things that you work on. Episode 2, we talked about having a glass ball. So you're juggling all these things, but you always want to keep your eye on that one glass ball. So you don't want that to ever fall. That's like your kids, right?
Sure.
When they're at 1.5, those are your glass ball. Mm-hmm. Make sure that you don't drop them.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's really important. And what I always say is the math that a lot of us fall into this trap of, it's like, okay, I do my work and then I have to sleep and then I'm left with this.
Right.
That's the math. And then our feelings is like, I'm left and it feels unbalanced. But if you flip that script and you work on those hobbies, you work on those things and you prioritize those, or start to prioritize those throughout your day, if you can do that, or parts of the day, you'll start to feel a little bit more balanced. You'll start to be like, hey, you know what? I really enjoy this. I'm going to start doing that every single day, and it's going to create some happiness in my life, and
Sure.
It's something that's giving back to me. So those are all really, really great points. I love that stuff. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. This is the part where I like to have a little fun, and we want to get into Dave's top 10 of randomness. So Dave's random 10 I want to get into now. Are you ready for this?
I'm as ready as I'm going to be.
There's nothing on your laptop for those who are watching on YouTube. There's nothing on your laptop that you're going to be able to help, because these are all new questions. I really thought long and hard about these. Some of them might be a little weighted because I do know you on a personal level and certain things. So we'll start off easy and just make sure that we don't really mess anything up here. So, all right, question 1. This is you have to pick one. Pick one. French press, drip, or pour over?
Pour over. All day, every day.
So I apologize for having drip for you when you came.
It's fine.
It was easier. I program it the night before, and I wake up and it is freshly ground every morning though.
I am an appreciator of coffee, but I am not a snob of coffee. I love good coffee, and I have the things I like. But if someone's going to offer me coffee, whether it's from a Keurig or a drip or whatever, thank you. I appreciate that.
Good stuff. Good stuff. All right. You said this earlier. Question 2. Stream and binge or live TV?
Well, I'll go stream, not binge. We don't have live TV anymore, so is that even available? Is that a thing? We just, with kids and just having things that are, sort of geared towards them, it just sort of makes sense for streaming. I try not to binge too frequently, only because it will eat your time, So we will generally pick a show that we are. If you say binging, like we might watch the same show every night for a couple weeks. So if that's a binge, then great. But we rarely are like we're doing the whole season in 2 days or something like that. It's usually pretty calculated. So
I'm with you there. What are you watching right now?
What are we watching right now? I think we just ended. We watch a lot of BBC shows, some of the mystery shows and some of the dramas, and we do a lot of home renovation shows. To look at the things that maybe someday I'll have to do at my house. But yeah, I mean, a lot of that stuff. We watched. If you guys get a chance to watch The Repair Shop, it's a BBC show that is basically all these craftsmen who repair antiques. So we were watching that a lot recently. So pretty cool stuff.
I'm gonna note that one. I'm a fan of that, so that's cool. All right, question 3: audiobook or paperback?
Audiobook, because I don't have a lot of free time, and when I do, I'm generally pretty tired if I'm suddenly like, I have nothing to do. And reading just makes me more tired. So audiobook all day, because I can listen while I drive. So, if I'm going into work or, driving over here, picking the kids up here, I can throw on an audiobook and I can, consume that content that way. I do like to read. I just am, especially if we're talking about recreational reading and not something that's really focused, definitely audiobook.
Any good audiobooks right now? Or anything you just finished up that you can share?
The Comfort Crisis by Michael Easter. It's a good one.
Great. We'll drop that in the description on agencybalance.com. All right, number 4. Hard rock or just rock or pop rock?
Are there any other categories? I don't know. I love music. I've played music for years and played in bands. Grew up in the DIY underground music scene. So if you throw it into rock, fine. Not really pop rock, not really into a lot of that, but hard rock, punk rock, all that stuff was definitely my world for a long time. So still probably a little bit in there. If I have to choose of those 3, I'm going to go with rock, only because it's more widely descriptive. Hard rock can get into bands that people like to make fun of.
Yeah, and I think
we won't mention Nickelback, but
that's I was going to say that has to be Nickelback. So yeah, and it's just funny too if you do watch music awards, it's everything is classified under rock. I'm like, how are they rock? That's really
right.
Not rock anymore.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Okay. This is an open-ended question. This is kind of to see how your engineering brain works.
Okay.
If I gave you a blank sheet of paper,
right,
what would you do with it?
Probably take notes on it for whatever I have to work on next. Yeah, that's or I might draw. I went through art school. That's my official business training is art school. So we probably sketch on it a little bit, draw some things, take some notes, and then move on to the next thing.
That's amazing. Good stuff. All right, this is really random. I originally wrote it just 2, but I had to add a 3rd. So cotton, feather, or memory foam pillows. Pick one.
What do they sell at Target? I don't know. I don't even think about that. I guess memory foam, because I guess the one pillow that I have that I like is memory foam. So yeah, we'll go with that, because I don't. those are decisions that I don't have to make. So it's not something I think about.
That's good, and it sounds like you're a heavy sleeper, and you don't have to worry about the preciseness of your pillow. I do. I cannot stand feather pillows. I specifically ask for it. I am that guy that asks for it when I go out to like hotels or something. I'm like, I need cotton or memory foam. I have an allergy to feather. Like I'll sneeze, but also I've been really into sleep about making sure I get a good night's sleep, and that's really important. So I am a fan of the memory foam, and I wasn't originally. Okay. Since we're talking about coffee earlier,
right?
Is the glass half full or half empty?
So this is the optimist pessimist question, and this is where you're going to corner me. So I'm a realist. Okay, I try to with a tinge of optimism. So I will just say that container is half because it's just half of its contents. You know what I mean? So is it half empty? I don't know. It depends on what I'm doing. If I'm drinking it, yes, then it's half empty. If I'm filling it, then it's half full. You know, it depends on what action I'm taking with it. If I'm emptying it, yes, then it is half of the way empty.
I'm not even going to try to elaborate on that. I am good with that answer. That is a very good answer. All right, which of your 5 senses, the senses that you have, is the strongest?
Is the strongest or is my favorite?
Strongest.
Let's see.
We were talking about Marvel earlier, so
right.
like if you one of those senses became your superpower, let's say that.
My strongest. Wow. I mean, I would guess hearing would be the best. I'm sure some would say otherwise, but that's probably the thing that I've cultivated the most over the years. You know, my eyes are getting worse and worse, so I don't want to say seeing, but I would say hearing, because I still do. I like to listen to complex music. I like to hear the levels of what's in there. I like to play music, so I like to hear what's going on. So I think that's the one. If it's not the best, it's the one I would like to be the best.
Okay. All right. So we're wrapping up here. These are the final 2 questions. These are kind of getting into the more philosophy.
Okay.
All right, or maybe not. Well, I just like to see how. All right, here we go. What is the one thing you will never do again?
Wow. A podcast. No, just kidding. I don't know. I mean, that's a broad question. The one thing I will never do again. Wow. That is so deep. Can we go back to it?
We can come back to it. I mean, you could say, you know, after this, I'm really
never let Dave choose the questions. That's the one thing.
Reconsidering audiobook or paperback. But,
right.
All right. So this might help it because it's the opposite, right?
Okay.
So what is on the, and maybe you don't have, you're a to-do guy. I think you're a list type of person. I gather that. What's on the top of your bucket list?
My bucket list. Just spend more time with my family, with, you know, my parents, my siblings, my kids, my wife. You know, you don't, with kids in high school now, you know, I know people keep on their bucket list like really big things, like, oh, I want to take a trip to wherever, I want to, you know, skydive, or, you know, there's these big things, and like I don't really think about my life in these like tiny little moments. I've done cool stuff that I thought that was really cool, but when I get to the end of my life, I'm not going to look back and be like, man, I'm glad I skydived. You know, like I'm going to be looking at, you know, I'm never going to like be sad that I spent too much time with my family, you know, and especially with kids in high school, you know, it seemed like yesterday they were 3 under 1.5, and I'm, you know, you're just trying to juggle everything, and then before you know it, you're, you know, you're looking at like, wow, they could literally be out of the house in, you know, 3 years, you know, so there's that side of like, I don't think I'm gonna look back and regret not having these very epic experiences and just be like, well, we had some really cool, you know, quiet nights at home where we just hung out, you know, like that's going to be way more impactful, I think, in the long term.
I agree. I'm living that right now. Anything you would never do again?
I think I would never do again. It's one of those things like, there's probably things, I mean, I'm sure if I went back through my life and said, oh yeah, I did this, and that was like the worst idea ever. But there's usually something that I can look at and I can say, okay, like there was a lesson learned there that was really important. And if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have, done this. There's points in life where I think you look at something and say, like, I would never do this again. And usually when you get to the other side of it, you can realize like what was happening at that time and the things that you learned through that. And I'm not going to turn back and say, man, I really wish I would never have done that again, because the things I came out of were so important, so I could, I'm sure, run down a list of regrets that I had in my life that I'd never want to do again. But at the same time, I'm looking back saying like, but that's who's made me into who I am today. So I don't have a long list of those things. So
that's a great way. That's a great point. And I think that's a great way to end today as well. Josh, thank you so much for coming on. There's no regrets, right?
No regrets.
And if any of our listeners want to check you out, check out the company, anything that you can share with our listeners?
Yeah, so our website is eicsolutions.com. Again, we're making air conditioning for specifically for electronic cooling, for cooling systems and machines. So yeah, check us out. Always new things happening, exciting things going on, and hopefully we'll see you there.
Josh, thanks so much. Have a great day.
All right, you too.
Subscribe to the podcast at agencybalance.com, Apple, YouTube, or Spotify.